Hey, what's up, everybody? John Manson here, along with Zach McLaren, as we debate the ASOR Red men's basketball GOAT discussion. Who's the greatest basketball player of all time in Liberty basketball history? We have started with 16, and through online voting on social media at ASOR Red on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, we are now down to the final two: Caleb Homesley, Darius McGhee. You can't go wrong, I don't think, with either one. But Zach and I are going to kind of break down the two, why you should vote for one, or what you should consider as you're voting. And so we thought it'd be kind of cool to get together and talk about it. But Zach, first of all, it was kind of your idea to do this once the men's basketball season was finished. You're our social media director, and you do a great job coming up with great fire content for Liberty fans to keep them engaged. What were your thoughts about this discussion and doing it now?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's more brackets. Like you can't get enough of that. And then it's just always fun to decide. Like we've had probably some of the, as you saw, like some of the top 16, like Caleb and Darius, the two in the championship, they've played recently. So we've seen some of the greatest Liberty basketball recently. Fortunately, we didn't get to March Madness this year, but I wasn't ready for that to end. And it's always fun to get the fans engaged with the content. And everyone's gonna have their own opinion. Like you're gonna have some people, Larry Blair's the GOAT. Some more recent people will be like Darius is the GOAT. But it's just fun to see like who everyone thinks is the greatest of all time and kind of what people bring up as their argument for it, and just to get fans engaged. It's always cool to see like the engagement across all social medias, and this kind of brings everyone out and everyone has an opinion, which always makes for some fun fireworks. So thought it'd be a
Yeah.
great time to do it, right after basketball season ended, when everybody's still like kind of in the basketball state of mind right before spring practice and the spring game for football. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see who ends up winning. We both have our own opinions, and we might share some of those here in a minute. But I just make a comment real quick about the seeding and the selection process. I mean, something you and I both kind of went back and forth on. And a few years ago, I think it was over COVID, I'd put out an article of the top 25 Liberty basketball players of all time. We kind of started with that list and kind of updated it from there and made some tweaks and adjustments. And there were a couple upsets. I mean, I didn't expect Lavelle Cabell to beat who did he beat? He knocked out Bailey Alston, which I didn't even see. I've been a Liberty fan since the early 2000s. I didn't even get to see Bailey play live, but I've watched some of his videos and familiar with the record book and things. And I think Bailey, deserved to win that. No offense to Lavelle, but Lavelle's obviously a great player. But, I think some of that, that was a 5-12 matchup and the upset for Lavelle. So some of that, it was probably due to Lavelle being a more recent Liberty alum. And we saw some of that throughout the tournament, but ultimately, we seeded it based on who we thought were the best, and the top four advanced to the final four. With Darius, Caleb, and then number 3 we also had Peter Aluma. And then who was our number 4 seed? Larry Blair.
Yeah,
Larry Blair.
Lavelle almost beat too.
Yeah, Lavelle almost took him out, but we had Lavelle or Larry as the number 4 seed. So I think those are the top 4 players. I mean, you can make an argument for Bailey Alston. I think we had him at number 5. I know some others had Julius Nwosu as a guy that should have gotten more love. We had him in the 8-9 matchup, and he lost out to Scotty James. Maybe a little bit of recency bias there, but again, it's an 8-9, so I thought it could have gone either way. Same thing with the 4-5 Larry Blair and Bailey if he had made it to that round, but he got knocked out. But anyways, enough of that. Let's jump into this debate that we're all excited for. And again, you got 24 hours to vote: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We'll get those polls out here soon. But let's have some fun, share it with your friends, and let's get those vote numbers up. But don't forget to go also Facebook and Instagram to vote, not just on Twitter for ASOR Red. But Zach, you don't have to necessarily say who you're going to vote for. That's not the purpose of this. We're more going to talk about why should you vote for one player over the other. So maybe start us off with Darius McGhee. Why should fans vote for Darius McGhee as Liberty's greatest basketball player of all time?
Man, I don't know if you can go wrong bringing up accomplishments for Darius, but I mean, first of all-time leading scorer in program history, not just in Liberty history, but in the ASUN conference history, all-time three-point leader in program and ASUN conference history. Tied Steph Curry this year, most three-pointers ever made in an NCAA D1 season. I mean, that's pretty good company. I mean, he's honorable mention All-American. Only other player to do that in Liberty history was Jesse Sanders. A lot of that was just his last year, the COVID year. But I mean, even before that, he broke Liberty's all-time three-point record. He was third, I believe, on the all-time scoring list, second in D1 behind Larry Blair. He's a three-time MVP for the ASUN. Only player in Liberty history to win multiple MVPs, much less three. He was the ASUN tournament MVP, multiple all-tournament first team. And even like his first 2 years when he was on those stacked Liberty teams, like he averaged over 7 and 9 points game his true freshman, true sophomore year, was our leading scorer against Tech in the round of 32 game, only round of 32 appearance. Like he's been a contributor no matter what team he's on. And then once he was able to gain into that starring role, that's when he really just took off as, one of the greatest to ever do it. I mean, the list of accomplishments goes on. He's probably the greatest shooter I've ever seen, like, play in person. And, I mean, you can make the debate, like, I mean, the stats are there. The proof is in the pudding for one of the greatest of all time in college history, for especially beyond the three-point arc. So, I mean, incredible player, incredible athlete, especially for his size. And, I mean, yeah, it's you got a pretty solid case to make Darius your greatest of all time.
Yeah, good point, Zach. And again, we're splitting hairs at this point in time. I mean, there's so much. I mean, just for guys to make the list of the top 16 to be voted on is quite an achievement of itself. But then to be able to make it down here and be the number 1 and 2 seeds and to be here in the final, it obviously speaks for itself. But yeah, I mean, Darius, one other thing, I mean, the list of his achievements and things he's done is so long. We could be on here for an hour talking about him, but you also can't forget those 40-point games he had. I mean, he had the ability to just completely take over games, and we saw that at times. Multiple times he scored over 40 points in a game and set individual scoring records, individual game scoring records, and Liberty Arena records, albeit as new as the Liberty Arena is. But so I think if you were to argue who is the most dynamic scorer in Liberty basketball history, I don't really think there's a debate. It's Darius McGhee, no questions asked. I do think they're, again, splitting hairs, but a couple things like, why would you not vote for Darius? Why would you vote for Caleb over Darius? I think there can be some discussion into, like, I think Caleb's biggest achievement and why he's really in this discussion is because of what he did in that NCAA tournament game. The biggest win in school history, as Liberty beat Mississippi State as a 12 seed over the 5 seed. The only win still to this point in the NCAA tournament. And we rode Caleb's back to that win. Without him, we obviously don't win the game. He scores 30 points, which I believe was a career high for him at the time. He made some clutch shots down the stretch, completely took over. So he had that, quote unquote, clutch gene. He was able to get the job done on the biggest stage and towards the biggest win in Liberty history. Whereas I think, Darius, like, you can point to games where he didn't get the job done. Again, not to put too much on Darius, but, we didn't make it back to the NCAA tournament this past year. And Darius, was 0 for 11 in that conference championship game against Kennesaw State from 3. He was 0 for 11. Again, I don't want to, throw trash on Darius at all, but that's a negative. That's a reason why you would say, hey, I would lean towards Caleb because of what he did. Caleb also, the 2018-19 team, and then the following year, the 2019-2020 team, in my opinion, those two are the best teams in Liberty basketball history. Those two, and we could debate which one over the other. So Caleb was the best player on the two best teams in school history. So I think that also gives him some more credence as well. He won the ASON tournament MVP. And again, 2020, we could have seen him, do more in the NCAA tournament again. We don't know.
Yeah.
That tournament got taken away. But anyway, so I think those are some of the main points for Caleb in his favor. What are your thoughts on Caleb and his claim to be the GOAT?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you laid it out perfectly. And Caleb is one of the only few I think you can make a case to be the GOAT over Darius. And also, like, to Caleb's credit, I think we agree that Darius is probably the most dynamic scorer in school history, but Caleb, he could take over a game too. I remember the year he won ASON MVP senior year after we had lost those two tough road games in Florida. It seemed like the last 5, 6 games of the year. I mean, he was dropping almost 30 every night, like at Jacksonville. Like when we needed a bucket, he got it, and he got in that zone, like just like in that tournament game against Mississippi State, where like you couldn't stop him. Like he was just drilling threes left and right, taking it to the basket, kind of like a beast mode. And I think that final 5, 6 game stretch that regular season is what won him the conference MVP over Asajala. And then, I mean, not just Mississippi State, but I think of some of Liberty basketball's greatest wins ever is when he was on the mountain. He shined the greatest. Like, obviously, the cherry on top is the tournament game, but UCLA, he led us in scoring 21 points. He led us in scoring in the 2020 ASUN championship game, won ASUN tournament MVP. So he had that clutch sheen, as you mentioned. Also, I think he's near like the top 10 all time in assist rebounds too. So he did a little bit of everything for us. And I mean, like you said, best teams in school history, he was the feature player. You can make the argument, I think, for the 2018-19 that for the majority of the season it was Scotty James because he led us in scoring, won ASUN tournament MVP. That tournament game was kind of Caleb's breaking out party. And then the next year he was 100% our featured player. But yeah, I mean, Darius played a huge role in that team as well, but that was Caleb's team 100%. And like we kind of alluded to earlier, Caleb didn't have that extra COVID year, and we didn't get to see what he could have done in the 2020 tournament. I mean, that team, we don't want to get too sidetracked because we could have a whole another episode on that. But I mean, that could have been like a Cinderella run for the ages based on what they had that year. So, you can't go wrong either way, and Caleb definitely makes a solid case.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'll kind of piggyback on what you were saying and just elaborate a little bit more yeah, you're exactly right. I think a lot of people forget that Scotty James, when he kind of got inserted into the Liberty lineup after transferring from Bradley, he was the top player on the team. Liberty kind of ran their offense through him. Even most of that 2018-19 season where Liberty ended up beating Lipscomb and then Mississippi State in the NCAA tournament. It was, like you said, it was Scotty James as a top player. The year prior, it was Scotty James that kind of took over towards the latter half of that season to kind of become the preeminent player on the team. But yeah, I think it was that NCAA tournament game when Caleb broke out with that 30-point game that, that kind of when the switch was flipped and he became the dominant player or the best player on the team, and then carried that into his senior year. So, Darius was a top player on his team for 3 straight years, whereas I think Caleb, you could 1 full year, maybe a half of a season. So it was a little bit different, and Darius still performed under all that pressure. I mean, being a 2-time conference player of the year, he got all the defenses. I think it was that 2020 team at Stetson. Donnie Jones chose to go to box and 1, and that was on a team that had Caleb, Scotty, Mayo, Georgie as all seniors, and Donnie Jones at Stetson elected to go to box and 1 on Darius, not on Caleb, not on Scotty, not on anybody else. It was Darius, and Liberty's offense ground to a halt. I think they scored like 42 points that game and lost, and it's really a bad performance for the team, but it was Darius that was taken out of the game, and that kind of and that was on a team led by a senior Caleb
Yeah.
Homesley. So, that was kind of another interesting little twist to this, and obviously them playing together as well. And then I think you pointed it out earlier, but Darius, that second round game against Virginia Tech after we had beat Mississippi State, Caleb Homesley didn't have his best game that night. Darius McGhee led us in scoring. He had 15 first half points, and Liberty was leading at halftime over the Hokies before they eventually pulled away in the second half. So Darius was a top scorer in that game. So again, you're splitting hairs here, but I mean, I think basically what we're trying to say is you can't really go wrong with either guy. They both represent Liberty basketball well and are worthy of being the GOAT.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I guess that's all we had. I mean, any final thoughts you got?
No, I mean, I think can't go wrong with either. Like you said, they both got stacked resumes. They're both two of the greatest of all time. I think there's a reason they're 1 and 2 in the seeding and in the championship game. I think the fans kind of agree with us that they're probably the two greatest to ever do it. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out and why. Hopefully, we can see some of the fans' reasoning on our social for why they voted for who, just to kind of elaborate on this discussion. But yeah, check it out, share it with everyone. Let's see who the winner is.
Yeah, make sure you get your votes out there on all three platforms. Share it with your friends and family, and Zach's exactly right. Leave your comments on the different social media platforms and on ASOR.com. We'll have an article out there as well on it, and leave your comments as to why you voted for who you voted. It's a lot of fun to read other fans' opinions and thoughts and why they would pick one over the other. So, make sure you do that and have fun with it. It's a lot of fun and it's a nice debate, nice discussion. And it's fun that we can have these debates and that we've had enough success on the mountain under Coach McKay and some of the previous coaches and previous players we've had that we can even have a legitimate GOAT discussion. I'm not sure we could have done that maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It would have been like, I'm not sure, who you could have. But I think both Darius and Caleb are worthy recipients of the honor, whoever should win. All right. Talk to you guys later.